Good evening. Welcome to Talking Up with Tamika. I'm going to get started in a couple of minutes. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this broadcast. Help me out, please. Oops. Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. As you come in, please share. Pretty please with sugar on top. Mhm. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again for tuning in with me on this evening for Talking Up with Tamika. Let's talk grief. So, for this topic, we'll be talking stages and symptoms of grief. For those of you who tuned in to last week, we talked about the myths versus the facts as it relates to grief. And the week before that, we talked about what grief is. We get a definition of grief. And if you missed out on the last 2 weeks, you can go over to my YouTube page at Tamika L. Fussell to view those videos. Okay, so again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into this evening's topic. And forgive me if you see me moving different directions. I'm a one-woman show, and I have 3 platforms going on at the same time. So thank you again for bearing with me. All right. So tonight is about just and symptoms of, and for many of us, know that grief comes in many forms. Okay, there is no wrong or right way to grieve. Um, there is multiple types of grief. It's not just related to death. It could be the loss of a job, loss of a relationship, anything you consider a loss, basically, that can turn into grief. Sorry. Okay. One woman show. So let's do a little recap of last week myths versus grief. So, for example, one myth was the pain will go away faster if you ignore it. That is definitely a myth. Fact is, trying to ignore your pain or keep it from surfacing will only make it worse in the long run. So, for real healing, it is necessary for us to face our grief and actively deal with it. Okay. Another myth we discussed on last week is pain should last about a year. That is definitely a lie. That is definitely a myth. There is no time frame when it comes to grieving. How long it takes differ from person to person. For some people, it may take weeks. For some people, it may take months. And for some other people, it may take years. There is no timetable when it comes to grieving. And then another myth is moving on with your life means forgetting about your loss. Of course, that is not true. Moving on means you have learned to cope with the accepted loss, but that's not the same as forgetting. You can move on with your life, keep the memory of someone that you lost as an important part of you. And in fact, we move through life, these memories can become more and more integral to defining the people that we are. Many times we find strength in things that we are going through pain, through suffering. We tend to find our strength. So tonight we're going to discuss the stages of grief. Some would say there are five, some would say there's seven, but we're going to deal with the five stages of grief. So in 1969, this psychiatrist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she introduced what became known as the five stages of grief, giving you a little background knowledge. So these stages of grief were based on her studies of the feelings of patients facing terminal illness, but many people have generalized them to other types of negative life changes and losses, such as the death of a loved one, a loss of a relationship, a bad breakup, like I mentioned earlier, loss of a job. So there's five stages of grief. One of them is denial. You may say, this can't happen to me. Like you may think you're immune. That's denial. Another stage is anger. Why is this happening to me? Who is to blame? You're mad at the world, you mad at the people, you even mad at the person that's involved. Another one is bargaining. Make this not happen, and in return, I will. So you try to compensate for whatever is going on. You're trying to bargain your way out of it. Another stage is depression. You're just too sad to do anything. You probably just can't move out the bed. You become depressed, don't want to be around anyone. You just want to stay to yourself. Another one is acceptance. I'm at peace with what happened. And that can be, a stage. You can be at peace with what happened. And it all depends on where you are in life and, what your beliefs as it relates to grief, on the many stages that you may go through, and you may not even go through any stages. And so that's that other myth that too, that you will automatically go through stages when it comes to grief. And that may not be the case. You may not, go through grief at all, any stages of grief. And it's okay if you're not in a position where you can accept it. It's nothing wrong with you because, like I stated in, I believe it was my last video, especially when you love someone or something, it's hard to let go. I mean, especially those who are believers, we know that when our loved one die and they go be with the Lord, they're supposed to be in a better place. But regardless of the fact, we love that person, we want that person to be with us. And so it's not always easy to accept that that person is actually gone. So another one that she does not list as a stage, but I believe it is one, is guilt. Guilt can be a stage. You could be blaming yourself, especially if you and that person were at a bad place before that person transitioned, or before you and that person broke up, or you may feel like you're the reason why you and that person broke up, and now you feel bad about it. It may be like going back to the death situation. I know there was this one scenario where this daughter and mother, they were not talking, and the mother reached out to the daughter because she had became really ill and knew that her time on earth was becoming really short. And so she wanted to mend her relationship with her, and her daughter refused to respond. And because her daughter didn't respond, they never had that talk. And the mother ended up dying. And the daughter, of course, you always know the ones at the funerals crying the hardest. Those are the ones who gave the most hell. And that's exactly what happened. There was that guilt of her not having that last talk with her mom and ignoring her mom, when her mom would reach out to her. And still to this day, because I have actually spoken to her since then, and she still have regrets. And those the moments that you can't get back. And some things just ain't worth it. So if 2020 has taught us anything, it should have taught us to love one another in spite of, no matter what is going on, because that's the one thing you cannot get back. Hmm. So if you are experiencing any of these emotions following a loss of any kind, it may help to know that your reaction is natural and that your healing is a process that doesn't happen overnight. Okay? And there's no timetable to it. So, however, not everyone who grieves goes through all these stages, like I stated earlier, and that's okay. Contrary to popular belief, you do not have to go through each stage, and there's no order to the stages, okay? Because it's listed one way does not mean you're going to go through that list in that order. So, in fact, some people resolve their grief without going through any of the stages. And if you do go through these stages of grief, you probably won't experience them in a sequential order. So, don't worry about what you should be feeling or which stage you're supposed to be in. Okay. And we know grief can be like a roller coaster. So instead of a series of stages, we might also think of the grieving process as a roller coaster full of ups and downs, highs and lows. And like many roller coasters, the ride tends to be rough in the beginning. The lows may be deeper and longer. The difficult period should become less intense and shorter as time goes by, but it takes time to work through a loss. So even years after a loss, especially at special events such as a family wedding or a birth of a child, we may still experience a strong sense of grief. And that can be considered triggers. I believe I talked about that last week when I spoke about my father. My father's been deceased for 30 years as of this year. His birthday and his death anniversary is in the same month in July. He was his birthday July 13th and he died July 31st. Okay. And I've been around my older siblings who had him around much longer than I did because they're so much older than I am. Um, and they would talk about like how he would, like for example, attend their graduations, high school graduation, college graduations. That's something that I never got. He was able to walk one of my sisters down the aisle for her wedding. That's something that I would never get. And so, listen to those stories, those became a trigger for me and made me feel some type of way because I'm not in a position to have those stories that they have that they can carry on and share with their children. But I'm grateful for them because it gave me another sense of who my father was because I had him for such a brief time. So that's an example of what can be considered a trigger. And then there's the symptoms of grief. Okay. So while loss affects people in different ways, many of us experience the following symptoms when we're grieving. So just remember that almost anything that you experience in the early stages of grief is normal, including feeling like you're going crazy, feeling like you're in a bad dream, questioning religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs. It's normal to do that. So some of the emotional symptoms of grief is shock and disbelief. So right after loss, it can be hard to accept what happened. Okay. You may feel numb. I know I could definitely relate to numbness. You could have trouble believing that the loss really happened, or even deny the truth. If someone you love has died, you may keep expecting them to show up, even though you know they're gone. You may, decide to pick up the phone to call them. Has that ever happened to you? You was thinking about something and it's like, because you're used to calling that person with something good or even when something bad happens and you go to pick up the phone and then you realize you can't call them. Yeah, been there. Sadness. That's another emotional symptom of grief. Profound sadness is probably the most universally experienced symptom of grief. You may have feelings of emptiness, despair, yearning, and deep loneliness. You may also cry a lot or feel emotionally unstable. And I want you to know it is okay. Okay, you're not losing your mind. There's another emotional symptom of grief is guilt. You may regret or feel guilty about things you did or didn't say or do. You may also feel guilty about certain feelings, feeling relieved when the person died after a long, difficult illness. After death, you may feel guilty for not doing something to prevent the death, even if there was nothing more you could have done. There's that sense of guilt. Or even when it comes to a relationship, maybe there was something that you wanted to say but didn't have enough guts to say, and it's too late because that person doesn't want to talk to you anymore. That person doesn't even want to see you anymore, and now you're not able to relay those feelings to them. Another one is anger. Even if the loss is small, you may feel angry at somebody's fault. You may feel angry and resentful. If you lost God, you could be angry with the doctors or even the person who died for abandoning you. I mean, at some point, I was mad at my father for dying, be honest, because he was a smoker. He was a heavy smoker. And even during his illness, he smoked. And I was mad at him. I'm like, didn't you love me enough to stop smoking? Like I had those talks, you know, I guess to the wall, but I was talking to him. Like I was mad. Like, dude, you had two young kids, a young wife, and you chose smoking. Like that hurt. It really did. But they say smoking is addictive, and it was an addiction. Cigarettes, okay. All right. So fear, which is a significant loss, can trigger a host of worries and fear. You may feel anxious, helpless, or insecure. You may even have panic attacks. The death of a loved one can trigger fears about your own mortality of facing life without that person or the responsibilities you now face alone. So my mom, like I said earlier, she was a young wife, and she just lost her husband, had two young kids, and now she had to take on this responsibility on her own. And it was difficult, because my father was an entrepreneur and my mom, she didn't have to work. So now she had to pick up the pieces, try to make ends meet. She had to find a job, working different jobs, trying to make ends meet. We were on welfare. You remember the paper food stamps? Oh, I used to be so embarrassed having to go to Pantry Pride with those doggone food stamps. But that was something she had to go through. And even me, after witnessing my mom not going through one death of a husband, but going through two deaths of a husband, I subconsciously became fearful of being married. I'm being transparent with you right now. I became fearful of being married because I witnessed my mom going through the death of a husband twice. And it scared me. And I had no idea that I was feeling this way or had these emotions until I took um, the certification class for loss and healing at St. Thomas University. And going through this one particular class, they had us to basically do meditation. And through the meditation, the teacher guided us through these different steps. And it then hit me why I was still single. Because I've had guys to come to me and, ask me. But I just, but oh my God, that it hit me then. Like, wow, I'm scared to get married because I don't want my husband to die. I don't want to go through what my mama went through. Not knowing experiencing. Subconsciously, we can have these fears and not even know it. And that's what happened with me. So I just went over some of the emotional symptoms of grief. Now I'm just gonna give you a few the physical symptoms of grief. And so when we often think of grief as a strictly emotional process, but grief often involves physical problems, including fatigue, nausea, lower immunity, weight loss or weight gain. Because I don't know about you, but I'm an emotional eater. And when I'm going through, all I want to do is eat. And yeah, it shows. And then acne breaking out. You can have pains. You can have insomnia, not able to sleep. You may even get to the point where you don't want to get out of bed or shower. Okay, the physical effects of grief. So as time passes following a significant loss, it's normal for feelings of sadness, of numbness, or anger to gradually ease. These and other difficult emotions become less intense as you begin to cope with the loss and start to move forward with your life. So, however, if you aren't feeling better over time or your grief is getting worse, it may be a sign that your grief has developed into more of a serious problem, such as complicated grief or major depression. And I will elaborate more on that on next week. So I hope that what I have shared with you on this evening has been helpful, because I want all of us to understand, what grief is, um, how to deal with grief, and the different stages of grief. Many of us are walking around with grief, and some of us are just able to function. Um, we just built like that. We're able to function. We're able to take on whatever the weight is and keep it moving, with our day-to-day hustle and bustle, but yet we're hurting inside. But on the outside, you can't tell. Are any of you out there guilty of that? Just give me a thumbs up or a heart or something. You can relate. It's not easy. It's really not. But the only way we can get through it is to face it. We have to face it. And so that's why I think it's so important that we have these discussions about, especially in the Black community, because many of us suffer in silence, and because we don't trust, we've been hurt to levels. We're embarrassed, it could be generational, because you've been taught, that you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to have these feelings, it makes you soft, it makes you weak. But that's a lie from the pit of hell. Okay. So whatever you're going through, you need to deal with it. And you need to find someone who is trustworthy, who can handle what you are sharing, because not everyone can handle what you are sharing. Just because you have a best friend does not mean that best friend is equipped to listen or receive what you need to share. Okay. So be discerning about who you share your business with, who you share your grief with, who you share your issues with. Okay. That is real talk. Um, but I want you to know that I am here. I am here for you. If you are interested on a for a one-on-one grief counseling session, you can inbox me and we can set that up. I also offer a 45-minute complimentary session. I'm talk about anything that you want, because sometimes we just need that outlet. Like, you don't need me to talk. You just need me to hear. You just need to get it out. And I don't mind being that outlet, because we all need to get it out. It doesn't help us when we get ill, we get sick. We wondering why, we have all these issues, with our health, because we hold that stuff in. That stuff will eat you up alive. Do you understand me? So please, many of us are walking around here with different illnesses because we are holding things in, and we need to let it go so we can be delivered, healed, and set free. Okay? Amen. So I thank you for tuning in for talking up with Tamika for this month's series on grief. I will be back next Thursday to speak more on grief at 7 p.m. Please like, share, this other two videos. This, go to my page at Tamika L. Fussell. Please follow Instagram, Facebook at Evolve the number 2L_Coach T. And again, I thank you so much for tuning in. If you just need a listening ear, I am here. If you need some steps on how to get through, I am here. Please reach out to me. You do not have to go through this alone, okay? You do not. I love you all. I love you all for real. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I ain't got to know you for me to love you. We all are God's children, and there's supposed to be love among us. Okay, so I love each and every one of you. Thank you again for tuning in. Take care, be blessed, and peace.